Hey there, I'm Pete Townsend, and this is Money Never Sleeps. We look inside the minds of entrepreneurs and at the crossover of startups, enterprise, finance, technology, and life as we know it. This week, I'm joined once again by Alejandro Gutierrez, a recognized authority in the rapidly evolving decentralized finance industry as an early adopter of real-world asset tokenization, contributing significantly to the sector's growth. Alejandro has also collaborated with MakerDAO, Tokeny, Securitize, and Centrifuge, amongst others, and he co-founded Console Freight, DeFactor, and ETH Dublin, showcasing his commitment to pushing the boundaries of DeFi innovation. This week, we dive deep into some of the biggest conversations in crypto right now, from the fallout of Operation Chokepoint 2.0 and the debanking of crypto startups to the latest regulatory shifts in the US and Europe and what they mean for the future of digital assets. We also break down why Solana is having its moment, the rise of decentralized exchanges, and why Uniswap launching its own layer 2 could be a game changer. Plus, I share the details on an exciting new event. Techstars and Crypto Mondays are coming together for a first-of-its-kind gathering in Dublin on March 10th. So we got plenty to dig into, all right here on Money Never Sleeps. Hey, Alejandro.
Hey, Pete, how are you?
I'm good. How are you?
All good. Glad to be here again.
Yeah, you in Dogpatch Labs today?
Indeed, I am. So
all right.
My second home, probably spend more time in Dogpatch than in my house, to be honest with you.
How long can you keep that up?
I'm not sure, actually.
Okay.
Maybe just move all together here in the scenes.
Yeah. Well, that's the thing. You've got commercial real estate, you've got residential real estate. Why not expand Dogpatch Labs to be residential as well in that little upper mezzanine area where there's some space up there?
I suggested at some point to the guys, right? It's like, hey, one of the big issues that you have with the startups in Ireland is the fact that a lot of people need to be in Dublin. They are not in Dublin, but there is no accommodation. So maybe you guys should provide that accommodation. Exactly the same as the guys from Station F doing in Paris.
Yeah, absolutely. No, big opportunity. Speaking of bringing people to Dublin, we've got an event coming up on the 10th of March that we just decided to launch. And this will be Techstars plus Crypto Mondays Ireland. So I'm going to have the Techstars Web3 class of 2025 here for the week of March 10th. And I've been talking to Lou Kerner, who was on episode 237 of Money Never Sleeps last year. And he is the founder of Crypto Mondays. And this is a decentralized group of folks leading events around the world. And it's just, hey, let's bring people together in crypto on a Monday night. Welcome all kinds. Whoever wants to come, just come along, network, learn, do whatever. Pretty informal and decentralized. And Lou's comment is, hey, whatever you want to do, just don't ask me to do anything, right? So he's been very gracious with this, and met him in person at the Techstars Web3 Demo Day we did last year in New York City during New York Tech Week. So we're going to have all the startups here. And I wanted to bring them out and introduce them to the network, but also kind of take advantage of the opportunity to bring people together across Web 2 and Web 3. I think we're too small of a country here to actually have these lines. And that, yes, we do need specialist events, and it helps to have those specialist events, but we also need to bring everyone together because people can learn from each other, network with each other, and find new opportunities together. So kicking off this Crypto Mondays Ireland chapter, right? And that, I think we're going to run this first event and then see how it goes from there. But also, Techstars will be doing more on the ground in Ireland over the next few months with some roundtable series on crypto adoption and things like stablecoin integration, real world asset tokenization, and trying to get some of the financial and tech community involved in talking about this and expressing their thoughts about this, their hopes, their thoughts, their dreams, their fears, or just even, hey, learning about it to begin with. So we're doing this event on March 10th. It's going to be at Toner's upstairs in the function room there. And again, keep it pretty informal. Say a few words, introduce everybody to the startups that will form the Techstars Web3 class of 2025. And everyone will have a drink, have a pint, have whatever, and have a few chats, and we'll see how this goes. So looking forward to getting that off the ground.
Fantastic, Peter. I think it's a great initiative. I've been in some of the Crypto Mondays around the globe, and they're always really good vibes in there and openness. And I think what you are mentioning is really important, right? Like Web 2 and Web 3, I think that, especially in the financial space, I think that line is getting blurrier and blurrier by the second. And I think in a couple of years' time, it's all going to be the same.
It will. There'll be no Web 2, Web 3. Hopefully there's no Web 4 or Web 5. It's just the web. It's the internet. It's just...
So are we going to get, was this just an invention from Snoop Dogg
What do you mean?
about Web 4 and Web 5? Do you remember that?
What did he do?
He mentioned about Web 5 at some point.
I didn't hear that. But leave it to Snoop Dogg. He definitely would have some great ideas on things. I'll tell you that. I'll tell you that. And Jesus, I feel like, and I may delete this out, but having Arabian Prince, one of the founding members of NWA, on the show last week or the week before, I feel like I've jumped the shark, but like 282 podcasts it took me to have a true rap legend on Money Never Sleeps, where we had the majority of the first, I don't know, a couple hundred episodes were named after a rap song, right? So we finally got there, and we'll see where it takes us from here. Okay.
That was cool, man. That was a good episode.
Yeah, he's a legend. He's such a good guy. I introduced him to one of the startup founders here in Ireland that they had similar ideas on, some things around golf, of all things. He's a scratch golfer. So we'll see where that goes. We had a few things that happened over the course of the last couple of weeks that I wanted to dig into here with you. This was one that you pointed out to me, and this was a post on X, a tweet that Coinbase had put up, that the facts are the facts. And this is on the FDIC, the Federal Depository Insurance Corporation. I think that's what it's called, the FDIC in the US. And that the story of Operation Chokepoint 2.0, or debanking, as it's referred to as well, the FDIC pressured banks to stop offering crypto products or pursue crypto-related projects. There was lots of expectations and lots of evidence that this was the case, but this actually is what came out in the congressional hearings back last week. And just a bit of history here, that Nick Carter from Castle Island Ventures wrote on Pirate Wires on the 8th of February, 2023, 2 years ago, Operation Chokepoint 2.0, and that the US government, through the FDIC, was choking crypto providers, more or less, and saying you can't have bank accounts. And they were applying all sorts of pressure to prevent banks from banking crypto firms and other fintech providers as well. And so Nick Carter wrote about this quite a lot, talked about it quite a bit on the Brink podcast that he does with Matt Walsh from Castle Island Ventures. And that was something that became part of my week-to-week listening experience and that news that I followed. But it hadn't really been brought into the forefront all that much until obviously Trump went through the whole process of his crypto agenda and getting elected. And then Mark Andreessen went on to the Joe Rogan Experience at the end of November and was talking about this as debanking. Now, there was no indication whatsoever that Andreessen has acknowledged Nick Carter's contributions on this subject. If they're both VCs and we won't. But now we've had congressional hearings with a whole bunch of notable names there. And it's basically, all right, this happened, that the banks were pressured by the FDIC to not bank crypto providers. And there's conspiracy theories that go even deeper than this. But what were some of your reflections on this, Alejandro?
You know, it's pretty interesting, right? Because this was Vox Populi. And for the people that had some dealings in America, that we did, and we had presence in there, having a bank account was one of the most difficult tasks that you could ever imagine you were related to crypto. It was almost impossible. A really well-structured project with well-reputable people. And people actually were just providing those introductions to banks, and banks were extremely reluctant about it. So it's really interesting to see how the government, even though everybody knew these, were barefaced lying to everybody saying, we have not put any pressure.
Yeah. And the thing is that those that were pressured can't talk about it because it's confidential supervisory information, and they still can't. I think it was Mike Lempres, who was the chair of Silvergate. He was on the Brink podcast recently, and he could say very little. And Silvergate was shut down, but he was making some, well thought out hints as to exactly what had happened.
But we're borderlining that situation in which conspiracy theory start becoming reality, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because a lot of these documents are going to be disclosed at some point. So now we are at that point where more information is going to be filtered, and then we're going to know what reality is. And if you ask me, there is no doubt that politically, the incentive behind this was all politically, right? And it was supported by the traditional financial system.
Yep.
There's no doubt. You make a comment here that is really interesting, because it was not just about the banking or not allowing companies related to fintech. And it's not just crypto fintech. There are some other industries in there, right, that are mentioned, that are seen as outcasts. Like they are like outliers of banks they don't want to do, even though they are regulated. Marijuana industry, one of them, right?
Yep.
It's regulated. Nobody wants to touch that money.
Well, that was Operation Chokepoint 1.0.
Chokepoint 1.0, right? So it is really interesting because it moves not just about people getting banked or not, but it's actually the banks, right, that were providing this service. And you mentioned pretty well, Silvergate was a bank. Silvergate revolutionized completely the way how banking was done in 2019, 2020, right? With the SingNet, and how quickly it actually was to be on ramping of ramping. And we used it, and it was fantastic, right? When Circle was integrated to it. It was amazing, right?
I know. And hopefully the deck has been cleared now and that we can move forward. And that this isn't just pressure and conspiracy. This is also, where do you fall on the risk appetite scale as a bank?
Correct.
And I don't know what may or may not have happened in the UK around this, but Graham Rodford, who is the founder and CEO of Archax, which is a crypto exchange, digital asset service provider in the UK. And Graham was on episode 37 of the podcast way back when. We called that Fight for Your Right after the Beastie Boys track. All right. And so he said, and to quote him, he said, "It's definitely frustrating to get a bank account in crypto. When I try to explain to people that we have struggled to get bank accounts, they look at us like it can't be true. It is. Most banks don't bank crypto firms. They claim it is a risk-based decision, but often the same firms are innovating in the space because they realize its significance in the future and are just making a sweeping, generalized approach to the market. We're thankful to those banks and partners out there who have been willing to push boundaries and hope that more start opening their doors." So,
like, you know, and the question here is, or at that time, like, well, it has been changing, right? But try to imagine, who's backing Archax? Aberdeen.
Oh yeah. Well, Aberdeen are now have a big stake in Archax. Yeah.
Right? So try to imagine if a company like that one is struggling with a lot of these components, what is the fate of a startup with 3 young founders?
I know. And we've seen it. And I've seen founders from years ago that were banked by a traditional bank. And that traditional bank had no clue that some of the activity that was going through that platform was crypto activity. Now, again, this was a long time ago, and it was way before Operation Chokepoint 2.0, way before this whole debanking and FDIC and all of that. But there's still, like you said, those 3 young founders of a early stage startup trying to get a bank account, versus if those 3 early stage founders were running some type of SaaS platform. You know, who's going to have the easier time getting a bank account? The SaaS platform, no doubt. So we're seeing things happening in the US that are bringing us up the curve, but we need it to happen. I was having a chat with ChatGPT about this, back and forth, me with ChatGPT, because I had no one else to talk to the other day, on the approach in Europe and the conservative nature of European commerce, more or less, compared to in the US, and it really getting down into the risk appetite of the European commercial mindset versus the risk appetite of the American mindset.
Yeah.
And there is a difference there.
Big difference. Like, I don't know if we're going to extend in this, but I think this story is fantastic, just to give you some flavor out of the listeners, a little bit of flavor on this. So I'm not going to just give names on this, but a few years ago, bank was trying to get crypto related companies on their books. So very heavily actually heavily going for these companies. And I remember talking to them and I needed to open a bank account and started the application. And probably few hours after submitting the application, it was rejected. And the reason behind the rejection was the fact that the name of the entity was too crypto explicit.
Really?
Yeah. So I went back and said, like, guys, you are trying to chase companies that are in the crypto space to bank with you, but if the name is too crypto explicit, that means that you are not. Yeah, there's like,
wow.
and those are the things that
Wow.
we're dealing with.
Good luck
right?
getting a bank account for Crypto Mondays Ireland, right?
I think that entity needs to be called something different.
Just call it something else. So many different experiences in the space. And what was good to see as well was that the US Federal Reserve, the chairman, Jerome Powell, said he's also worried about debanking and that what that means for the wider economy. And they also had some snippets in that article as well, mentions about what was going to be happening, perhaps around stablecoins in the US with things going on there. I'm glad to see at least Jerome Powell speak out about this as well.
It's really interesting, because try to imagine, right? If you have a lobby that is extremely powerful, can influence certain sectors of the government, right? And then suddenly affect completely an industry just not for the reason that industry is harmful for society. It's just because it's not convenient for some of the establishment.
I know.
So
I hear you.
It's a great take.
It is. And, there's, conspiracy theory, not even conspiracy theory. I mean, Nick Carter reported on this, that, there's a group in the US called Better Markets that were clearly aligned with Elizabeth Warren and were just publishing all this content around crypto bad, crypto bad, crypto bad, crypto bad over and over again. And so it got quite convoluted. Like, again, just hopefully we've cleared the decks. We can move forward in the right direction.
Yep.
Speaking of that, Hester Peirce, who is an SEC commissioner, who is leading the crypto task force, she came out with the journey begins, right? Which is a new journey for the SEC with crypto. And she basically acknowledged that the SEC's last journey with Gary Gensler behind the wheel was reckless driving. Now, she didn't mention Gary Gensler by name, nor should she in a gracious manner do that, but she at least said, this was a bit reckless, or she used the word careening down the road. So she said that they've engaged with crypto since 2013, but the commission's handling of crypto has been marked by legal imprecision, yes, and commercial impracticality, which I would agree with. But she did say, please be patient. We want to get this into a good place. We want it to get to a place where crypto would never be a haven for fraudsters. One of the other really interesting things she said, and this was that I really identified with, was that spinning up coins and tokens is easy. If people want to buy a token or product that lacks a clear long-term value proposition, they should feel free to, but should not be surprised if someday the price drops. In this country, people generally have a right to make decisions for themselves.
This part you're going to read is fantastic.
But the counterpart to that wonderful American liberty is the equally wonderful American expectation that people must decide for themselves, not look to mama government to tell them what to do or not to do, nor to bail them out when they do something that turns out badly. It's like, hallelujah.
Yeah.
That's just what I've been waiting to hear. That's it. Because people are like, okay, what do I do about these meme coins? I'm like, buyer beware. Do it if you want to, but just know this is your liberty. This is your right to buy. This is your right to watch and see what happens. But, it was wonderful to see her say that.
Yeah. So it's a breath of fresh air. I think it's great. I'm still skeptical because in most of the space, we have been scarred after what happens with Gary Gensler, that we thought was going to be a savior for the crypto space, and that have been completely opposite.
Where do you think it could go wrong?
Is implementation. All these things, regulation is not about what actually is put on the paper, but it's about implementation. That's what we are seeing right now in Europe, right?
Totally. Yeah, with Mika.
With Mika. On paper, it's fantastic. See all the governments, how they're trying to implement this and how they're actually having severe issues to create those frameworks. So look, I'm positive, but I'm cautious about how this is going to be implemented.
Yeah, like we could probably look back at the beginnings of Mika and equate the statements coming out of that time from the powers that be, that we could equate to some of what Hester Peirce has said here. You know, she's talked that we had SAB 121 repealed. Wonderful. That's a great starting point. But then she mentioned things about crypto versus securities laws, scoping out of activity that's not relevant, filings on token offerings, special purpose broker dealer licensing, all these different kind of topics. And you could probably put that on the same level as the Mika statements from, 5-6 years ago.
But funny you mentioned that, because I was going through every single one of those points. I think there are 10 points and it sounds pretty much the same. There is a really interesting point that I think is different from the Mika perspective, is that cross-border sandbox. And what they're talking there, I think is a really smart take or approach, is about international scope and get other people across to be part of this international cross-border sandbox.
Oh, totally.
That's because we're talking here, and this is what we keep forgetting, right? Oh, not us, because we're in this business every single day, but regulators keep forgetting. We're talking here about a worldwide industry. As a crypto provider, can be providing services everywhere, especially you are in DeFi.
Yeah, like you could have a stablecoin issuer in the US who someone, what was the example? It was these guys in Africa, and they were saying, listen, because they are a business and they're a platform, they can get a license, not a license. They get KYC'd by Circle, the stablecoin issuer.
Yes.
And that they can redeem stablecoins there. If someone sends them USDC for one of their clients, one of their users of their platform, they can then go to Circle and they can exchange that stablecoin for US dollar and then offboard that US dollar. But once you start getting into the fiat territory of the US dollar, where do you offboard that? Do you have connectivity with bank accounts? What is your own facility to be able to do that? Do you need to have your own bank account? Can you get a bank account if you're a crypto platform? And then when you even think about, well, where did that stablecoin come from? How did I get USDC? Well, that actually came from someone that wanted to exchange a Nigerian Naira stablecoin. And that had to be onboarded from somewhere with an actual Naira. Yeah. And so what is the regulatory framework around that? So all of this stuff is moving cross-border. Okay, let's let the US get their story sorted out first, but they can't do it with in such a box, I
fully agree
that they're not thinking about how the rest of the world will engage with those that are US businesses. And as a side note, I spoke with an OG in the crypto space yesterday who said founders are flocking back from Dubai back to the US now in crypto because of this landscape opening up now.
Big time. That is going to be all sorts. Like I talk to a lot of young guys right now in the space, and a lot of those guys are considering moving back to America because that's where the opportunity is or will be.
So Hester Peirce, she has been the voice of reason all throughout the Gary Gensler regime. Yeah. And for her to come out and make a statement like this, we were expecting it, right? When she was appointed as heading up the SEC task force. So lots of nice green shoots of good things happening. But I think the big question I asked was, where can it all go wrong? And you're saying it's on the implementation, right? And we need to be considerate of the fact that this is cross-border activity.
There are no borders in crypto. And something to add is that because we're talking here about American stablecoins, that is what is dominated, all that payments and transferred industry.
99.4% of stablecoin volume is in USD pegged stablecoins.
Exactly. America or that view of an understanding, right? A broader understanding of how this works internationally is critical for them.
Yeah, it is. And the argument not the argument, but the benefit of all this is that why wouldn't the US want USD in more people's hands around the world?
Definitely.
It's a question of, will the US dollar continue to be the reserve currency around the world? This helps push that narrative. And there's been all this pushback coming out of China and the yuan, the central bank digital currency that is now in the market in China. and the expected surveillance that the Chinese government have
Yeah.
over all of your spending with that. Again, conspiracy theories, alleged.
Yeah.
And that the US has said, we're not doing that. We're not going to ever launch a CBDC. Donald Trump
Yeah.
has said it. Jerome Powell said he would agree that it's not the right thing to do. Having a tokenized version of the US dollar, a fully digital version of the US dollar, we already have that. We already
It's
have that.
there.
All that we're missing is the regulation behind this in the US to give people more trust, faith, and confidence in this.
Into it.
So, I see this as being one of the big wins coming out of the whole journey beginning again is on the stablecoin side. And hopefully, I think there was a new bill introduced through the Senate. It's called the Genius Act. I forget what it stands for, but the US is very good at coming up with acronyms for the acts that they put through Congress. So
Interesting.
flipping to the other side of this, but I think we would come full circle with this. Let's look at the true crossover between crypto and traditional finance and how we bring the two of these together and the regulation around it. Is that this growing activity that's happening around Solana over the last number of years. And this was a report coming out of CoinDesk that was just another piece of evidence pointing to the growth of Solana, is that the Solana DEX volume, or the volume of transactions that were happening on decentralized exchanges that were running on top of the Solana chain, that DEX volume topped 60 million so far in February, as it's looking to extend its 4-month winning streak over Ethereum. And there's just more and more activity going towards Solana lately. I'm seeing a lot of the DePIN projects, the decentralized physical infrastructure networks are setting up on Solana. And obviously all of the meme coin activity is centered around Solana, but also this longer term vision of Anatoly to have a totally decentralized NASDAQ, which was one of his earlier comments on this. And so it's, an interesting comparison of Solana versus Ethereum with ETH kind of being the world computer and Solana being just a high performing chain for all sectors. And you may look at Ethereum and say, well, is that the same thing as a high performing chain for all sectors? No, it's different. There's some semantics there. But what Solana has been focusing on is high performance, fast throughput, less expensive processing costs. It's growing quickly.
It's growing quickly, and it has an appeal to a lot of people. I've seen, as you mentioned, a lot of projects right now looking to expand into the Solana ecosystem. It's a really vibrant ecosystem. I think it's way easier to navigate than Ethereum. Ethereum sometimes can get extremely complex. And from the resource perspective, if you are a small startup, that might not work. It can take time.
Yep.
To just get things across, especially on the fully decentralized protocols. What I see that is really interesting, right, is that evolution, right?
Mm-hmm.
On Solana to be looked as, or like down as like, it's just a fun, like a chain. It's a funny chain, right? Like, it's where the meme coins. To suddenly starting to say, wait a second, there's more than that in here. And I think all that experimentation that came from the meme madness, right? The meme craze, in a way was a good exercise for Solana to say, hey, look, clearly we were able to cope with it in a decent manner, right? There were no outages. That was what everybody was completely panicking about. It did not happen with the trunked meme coin and the Solana. And that week, that was just utterly madness from the transaction perspective. They cope with it and it run, right? So I think this gave probably this hope to say like, hey, maybe we can start building some other things that are way more serious in Solana. What I always say, right, is like, who knows what chain is going to be here in 10 years? New technologies, is all sorts of things, right?
I find myself saying this a lot, Alejandro, is that sometimes when you look at a startup pitch, what you see as their pitch as to what their product is and what it's going to do, the founder thinks that's their everything. I sometimes look at that and say, it's just a go-to-market strategy. This is just something to get you into market, to get you operating, to get your platform up and running so that you can start collecting data on how your users are using your platform so that you can iterate and build towards your big longer-term vision. Had a conversation with a founder about this recently who were building something that looked a little bit flimsy in terms of its sustainability long term. And I said, I kind of have an idea about what your long-term vision is. Can you please state that to me? And they did. And it was amazing. It's that it doesn't come out in the deck. It doesn't come out in the pitch. And that, okay, it's just a go-to-market strategy. That's just what it is. Now, I'm not saying Solana's go-to-market strategy was around just all of these like fun type of use cases, but that brings volume. That brings testing the hell out of your platform.
Yeah.
That gives you the data you need in order to figure out what your evolution is going to be to the higher and higher levels of volume and processing speed and robustness and provenance and governance around that.
Don't you think that politicians are looking at these meme coins right now and say, I can fund my campaigns in a completely different manner?
Why wouldn't you?
Why wouldn't you? Like, I think we need to just look beyond, right? What the obvious is that is, memes and there are tons of scams. There is no doubt, and it's fun, and it's gambling, it's a roulette. Fair enough, right? There's way more that is going to come out of this from the technology, from the usability, from the applications into some other industries, right?
Yeah, I'm fearful of the campaign finance reform initiatives behind this that will probably step in and say, sorry, can't do this. And so, this may step up a pace, but there's plenty of other ways to do this. There are plenty of other ways to do this. And it's basically monetizing virality is what you're doing here. And you can do that through meme coins around Trump and Melania. But on the Solana side, the DEX volume is interesting and seeing that go up as far as it has. But also, some of the other things that are happening is that Canary Capital, VanEck, 21 Shares, and Bitwise have all filed with the SEC to launch Solana ETFs.
Solana ETFs, yes.
And that brings it even further along the institutionalization line with launching an ETF around that.
And as a matter of fact, I know that Solana is extremely interested now just to say, hey, look, we do all this fun stuff, but one of the focuses is just going to the next level.
Yep.
And start playing, let's say, with the big boys.
Yep. And they brought on Nick Dukoff a couple of years ago to work on this from an institutionalization perspective. Shout out to Nick. He's been on the show.
They're doing well. Like there was Securitize actually launched a fund. I think one of the first funds in Solana last week as well. I think it's great to see. I think Solana is bringing a fresh perspective into the whole crypto ecosystem. And I think it was needed in a way.
Definitely. Speaking on the institutionalization front, and IPOs are a good sign of institutionalization. There was one that crept up that you were a bit curious about with BitGo, perhaps mulling an IPO this year.
I don't understand why. If I know, we were just chatting with some friends last week about it. I don't think it makes any sense to me, especially after the whole saga or debacle last year regarding
with Justin Sun
and the commingling funds, minting WBTC without having to prove reserves.
Yes. So BitGo involved as one of the stakeholders, more or less, in this whole arrangement for how WBTC or wrapped Bitcoin is operating. And Justin Sun's now involvement, BitGo are involved with that. BitGo, for those who don't know, are a crypto custody firm, one of the OGs in this space. So
fantastic reputation, right? That was the go-to. If you want to be a reputable token, BitGo was your first choice, right? The way it was looked at.
I was surprised as well to see BitGo. They last raised money at a 1.75 billion valuation in 2023. They raised 100 million. So when your last valuation is 1.75 billion and going public, don't know where they are in terms of valuation now, 2 years later, but probably, maybe 5 billion. Going public at 5 billion, it's a little bit of a different story than some of the other IPOs that are being pointed to, such as, I don't know where Kraken's going to end up, but if you look at Stripe, north of 70, 80 billion, you look at Revolut is up around 45 billion. So
for me, it's too early, especially because I don't think they have recovered from that episode.
Yep.
And it opens a lot of questions regarding why are they doing it now? Why now?
Well, maybe it's time to get out.
Could be.
You will see. One more last thing here today, Alejandro, in that we've got some news from Uniswap, with Uniswap Labs officially launching their layer 2 Unichain. So they've launched a layer 2, or an L2, is another blockchain that is a layer on top of Ethereum, for those who aren't aware. And that what happened in the last couple of years is that Coinbase built their base chain, or their L2, on OP Stack, which is the toolkit on which a number of players are building a layer 2 on top of Ethereum. And that not only was it Coinbase and their base chain, but also Kraken's Inc. is now an L2 that are building on OP Stack. World have their world chain that is built on OP Stack. And Sony's Sony, the media company, that is built on OP Stack as well, and kind of pushing the super chain thesis, but all is layer 2 blockchains on top of Ethereum. So Uniswap finally is launching their own, called Unichain. And I think there's a lot of different ways that this could go. And I was having a chat with the same Bitcoin OG who told me about the founders coming back from Dubai to the US, also said, listen, looking at all these L2s that have launched and all of these, this kind of second layer on top of Ethereum, that how many more of these do we need? And the Bitcoin OG was like, listen, we're going to continue to need them for these specialist use cases, and that some of them will combine together, some of them will merge together, some of them will disappear completely. And that this is just how the landscape in blockchain will continue to develop. But what's more important than the topic of talking about how many L2s we have, it's how are they communicating with each other, and cross-chain connectivity, cross-chain liquidity. Building them on the similar toolkit of OP Stack is a good idea. But I think Unichain and Uniswap have different ideas around what they're going to do with this.
It is really interesting, right? Because there's a big narrative here. I can understand why the L2s. I don't understand why we need 300 of those ones, because without that connectivity, it's just silo after silo on top of Ethereum. And who needs that? Nobody. So I think it's important to mention, Peter, as well, that like you have the optimism, like a rollups, and then you have the CK rollups, right?
Yeah. And
then you have two different islands in there, or two different continents in there, that they need to just communicate somehow as well, right? So it's making the problem like even bigger, right? From the connectivity perspective. Like if you see on the OP stack, I think there are 27 chains that have been created. So there are 27 until December, I think so. Probably more than 10 of those ones have irrelevant volumes, completely irrelevant volumes, right? And then that poses a question about why we keep creating these L2s. And I have a theory behind this. It's like the best business model, or the model that is proved in the crypto space, is the fees. That's how you make money in the space. So when you have a token, but you don't have a chain, you are eroding your token, because you're making the money on transactions outside your chain, because you don't have a chain, which means that you need to pay fee to somebody else. And then you need to just find a model in order to just enhance or provide value to your own token. And on top of that, like from the scalability perspective, there are not many apps around that actually have provided enough volume for those tokens to be useful. So layer 2s make a lot of sense from the business model, from the investment thesis perspective as well, because a lot of these investors, they push big volume of cash, they get tokens, and they are going to be able actually to wash all the investment quite quickly into the ecosystems. So now if we go back to Uniswap, right? I was surprised in the beginning about them creating their own. After that, it's like, yep, it makes sense from the business perspective. Actually, they're saying it. Say, look, people now are going to be transacting our layer, which means that there are going to be fees.
There will be.
That are going to be for us in a hyper successful protocol anyway, right? So the question that I have is, now with the regulatory landscape changing in America, is this probably opening the door for finally Uniswap finalize that idea they have in the beginning that people are holding those tokens are going to have some sort of real benefit, tangible benefit from being part of that ecosystem. Because that's what they wanted to do in the beginning, right?
I think so. And because Uniswap, right, and they got a SEC Wells notice, right, about them being an unlicensed security exchange. Like, come on, if you look at Uniswap, and I've talked about this on this podcast before, is that if you look at Uniswap, it just looks like a utility. It just looks like something that you use to go swap tokens with. And that's the whole idea and the whole point. But Uniswap is a brand in crypto and beyond has grown to be such a big brand. And I think they have this opportunity now to do so much more with it. And that, well, hey, listen, they've got this baseline of activity where they're accruing fees out of the transactions, but hey, let's take that to another level and let's do that and have even more control on the fees that accrue to them based upon the activity that's coming through Uniswap. It's like, how could they not?
We're still really romantic about a lot of these ideas in the space, right?
I know.
We love business that don't make any money, right?
Oh my God. And it's just because, this is, and there's so much of that. There's so much of that.
Yeah.
Okay, I can clearly look at a project in blockchain, in crypto and say, well, of course that's needed for this space to grow. From a long-term vision perspective, I'm 110% aligned with that. But from a right here, right now perspective of sustainable businesses that actually can create something of value that enables people to earn a living by working for them, that's where some of this just doesn't stack up.
It is pretty interesting because it just tells you a little bit of the mindset of the collective in the space, right?
Oh, totally. And that so much of the development in the space over the last couple of years has been, how do we bring real world assets into this? How do we start bringing some applicability and use cases that people understand in the wider mass market and say, well, let's get some transactions going on those types of activities so that those that are running the chains can actually accrue fees from that type of activity. And, we are in the last year seeing a ton more of activity in that space with real world assets, as we've talked about. So
let's hope that's where it's heading. And I hope that's the final objective, the final goal, the vision that the guys from Uniswap have.
Well,
that would be great. It will change dramatically, actually, the structure of what we are seeing from the token utility and why people actually will be really eager, right, to be part of communities.
It was Hayden Adams, the founder of Uniswap, who said, we are anticipating a world of many, many different use cases of which trading is a small subset. So,
that's amazing.
This is just one of the many use cases of blockchain technology is basically 90% of the activity that has happened over the last 15 years, right? Yeah. So we have a long way to go. On that note, Alejandro, we have a long way to go with the rest of our day. So
indeed,
why don't we wrap it here and keep your eye out for the news on the Techstars and Crypto Mondays Ireland event kicking off on the 10th of March. And
I'll be there, that's for sure.
Oh, you better be
supporting.
Thank you, Alejandro.
Pete, thank you very much again.
That does it for this week, folks. Thanks to Alejandro Gutierrez for co-hosting this episode with me. Check out the show notes on moneyneversleeps.ie for the links to get in touch with Alejandro and to learn more about the stories we covered. If you like what you heard, please leave us a rating and a review on Apple Podcasts or Spotify as it helps others to find the show. Also, thanks to Conan Brophy from Create Sound for mixing and editing this episode. Conan is an excellent media man to work with on your own podcast. As for me, I'm an early-stage startup investor in the next version of the internet, and I lead the Techstars Web3 Accelerator. There are plenty of links in the show notes on moneyneversleeps.ie on how to get in touch, so don't hesitate to reach out. Finally, till next time, thanks for listening. See ya!